Thank you for your kind words. My colleague, Election Commissioner Mr. Jyoti, Director General of CDAC, Professor Mona, his colleague Dr. Darbari, my colleagues from Election Commission, Mr. Zutshi, Mr. Sinha, and another Sinha from State Election Commission, all the invited leading luminaries from across India and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, my profound apologies for being very, very late actually. And I can't be really apologetic because weather is not in my control. Better late than never, I arrived in Pune. Thank you. So I am very privileged and very honored to be here in this conference. And actually, I am very pleased when I took over as Chief Election Commissioner. I wanted to visit CDAC as the first visit. Somehow it got delayed. And even today, I am not able to visit CDAC because I am visiting this IITM. Maybe next time we will come and visit your institute. I would like to thank Professor Mona for inviting me to this conference. And I would like to congratulate Dr. Mona and all of his colleagues that he organized such an excellent conference here, where he has assembled all academicians, all researchers, practicing administrators, etc. And I'm sure the result is going to be very, very meaningful and very, very positive. I would start by saying that, as mentioned earlier, that the mandate of the Election Commission is to conduct fair and free elections, where we want every voter to be on our roll and everyone to be able to vote. Our current commission has a vision, and that is where I think this conference is very significant. Our commission desires to be dynamic, that is changing with time and being open to ideas and practices which are available elsewhere. And therefore, when I heard that our voting conference is being organized, I took it very positively and with lot of hope, because we in the commission would be very, very open to ideas which are well tested and which are well validated. So I welcome this initiative. My colleague Mr. Jyoti mentioned our task is gigantic. We deal with huge numbers, and most of our election management is database oriented, huge database. 850 million voters are on our national database. And therefore, we think that going forward, information technology is going to play a very vital role in our election management. In the last general election 2014, I have been told that during the election process, there were 161 million communications, which constitute about 17% of the total transactions of the e-governance in the country. And therefore, you can very well understand the size of our operations. And this would become more important going forward in future. The rate at which our population is growing, and every year there is a rise of 1.76%. Therefore, we estimate that from the current level of 850 million voters, in less than 10 years, we will be touching 100 million voters. And that is where the huge challenge and challenges would lie. And therefore, we cannot shy away from the introduction of information technology in our operations. Of course, the Election Commission introduced IT applications and technologies right from the beginning of this century. And I'm told there are 38 major IT applications in our commission, both internal as well as external. And I would also like to say that our commission would like to be voter-centric, and therefore more than a dozen of these IT applications are voter-centric. And we are very thankful to CDAC, particularly Professor Mona and his entire team who have developed this National Voter Service Portal. Now we have a national database of 850 million voters. You plug in your name and you get millions and millions of your namesake, and then you can zero in on. So this is a huge task which our team and CDAC has done, and this has brought great satisfaction to us. And now, as was mentioned earlier, we are now in the process of using this NVSP and other methods to connect all the Aadhaar numbers to our electoral photo iCard. It's a huge task. As was mentioned, 84 crores Aadhaar cards have been issued in the country, of which 62 have been actually delivered. And out of those 62 crore Aadhaar numbers, who are also our voters, we have already collected 32 crores Aadhaar numbers, and they are in the process of being fed and being seeded. And this will generate the uniqueness of each voter, will eliminate to a large extent the multiple voting and so-called duplicate, fake, bogus voters in this country. And this will ensure the correct electoral roll in this country, and thereby adding to the integrity of election process. Before talking about the topic today, it would also be apt if I mention that taking these challenges into account, Election Commission wants to develop an IT vision for next 10 to 15 years. And we want to have world-class IT infrastructure at all levels. We have already having services of CDAC. We have also engaged the National Institute of Smart Governance, which is developing a detailed project report for us. And actually, we have desired to work with all the technical institutes, reputed IITs, CDAC, and any other organization. And I must mention the name of Professor Shahane, who has been so kind to us that in spite of his business in IIT, he has been a pillar of strength to the commission in technical work. Actually, a lot of integrity of the electronic voting machine is ensured by our technical evaluation committee, in which Professor Shahane, Professor Mona are working. So thank you very much. And we will have to make the example of EVM work in future when we come to the question of R voting. Now, R voting is being talked about today. Much has been said by my colleagues before, and R voting is very old in history. I am told this was practiced even during Roman Empire. I have not seen, but I am told. And in the current age of globalization, changing lifestyle, presence of World Wide Web, there is a continuous demand from people to explore new ways to make voting accessible. For a variety of reasons, voters who cannot come to our polling stations. Of course, some categories have already been mentioned. Our Indian diaspora, which is 10 million strong number around the world, they have been pressing this demand, and therefore we have to design various ways in which we can bring them into our fold. Now, this remote voting in the context of NRI has also been occupying space in media. Many NRI unions and associations have been approaching Supreme Court and how we have come to this pass where we have recommended legislation regarding electronic postal ballot has already been explained by my colleague Mr. Zutshi. This was on account of the interest and cognizance taken by Honorable Supreme Court and the work that was done by the Committee in the Election Commission of India. Besides working on NRI, service voters, and other categories where electronic facilities are to be provided, the Commission has taken a decision, in fact, which has already been accepted by the Supreme Court, that electronic voting or remote voting is an item, is an agenda on our business. This has been retained as an important agenda item, and which I consider to be a very positive development. And this agenda very clearly says that while our voting may not be available or may not be applied in the short term or medium term, but in the long term, of course, in economics, in long terms, everybody is dead. But in the long term, could be from 5 years onward. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 15 years. So, in the Commission, we feel that our voting process, development of technology, its testing, its validation, legislative process, talking to political parties, talking to convincing media, dealing with judiciary, administrators, and in particular voters will be a long drawn process. As has already been mentioned, large number of countries have been trying and toying with the idea. So it will take time, but I'm sure that it is the way you look at the situation. I'm looking at the situation that at least 10% of the glass is full, in the sense that we have retained the agenda of our voting or e-voting in the long term, and that is a very good feature. Now, some mention has been made why other countries have not done, and why some countries have done. In some countries it has worked, in some countries it has failed. So, the important thing is that introduction of our voting, in my view, should not have any connection with the state of development or the state of democracy. I mean, an example has been made that USA, UK, Germany, the Netherlands have already rejected it. But there are many other countries who are not comparable with these countries. They have introduced it, such as Brazil, Venezuela, Philippines has been mentioned, and they are using the electronic technology. I'm sure these countries have conducted the full analysis of what opportunities are there, what threats are there, what strengths are there, and what weaknesses are there, which are available in plenty in the literature. And the most important thing I feel is that whenever this technology comes up, it must be foolproof. There is no doubt about it. And I would also say that even the introduction of electronic postal ballot, which we have recommended for one-way transmission, it also has to be foolproof, and it should meet all requirements of our election commission. Because if this technology fails, then I can assure you that this electronic voting or remote voting would be the remotest possibility, at least in our country. Therefore, it is a big challenge, Professor Mona, and the team which is working here. Therefore, threats have to be taken very seriously, and I was happy to read that even CTAC has taken it as a grand challenge, not a challenge, grand challenge, and I'm sure they will come up with a technology which will be meeting all of our requirements, which you know briefly are, as already mentioned, easy access to all voters, free and influence free, secrecy at all stages, and every voter needs to be authenticated, and prevention of multiple voting. I'm sure these are very simple things for such an institute which has supercomputers here, and is setting up supercomputers elsewhere. Now the issue, whenever we are taking up a technology, there could be issues in the public arena, and those will have to be attempted. You know, in the current time and for past 65 years or 63 years, ever since the first election was held, the elections have been conducted in controlled environment. That is, a voter comes to a polling station and he casts his vote in controlled environment. Now, when the technology is developed, we will have to really debate whether we should start with e-technology or e-voting in a controlled environment like a kiosk, like a polling station, as many countries have done, or should it be in open environment? That is, anywhere, anytime you can cast your vote. So this is one important thing. Another thing from our perspective would be whether electronic voting should be the only option or should it be the one of the options that would be available to voters. The most important aspect of electronic voting would be auditability, which I am sure has been listed as one of the agenda item of this conference, where a voter will have to be verified end to end, and there are leading persons available here. Therefore, e-voting should be with or without auditing device, like we have VVPAT in EVM. So, will there be a device for auditing? And then another issue which Vinod Zutshi mentioned, should we devise a new technology or should we customize what is available in the world? So this would be another aspect of the whole issue. And then another aspect is whether this source code should be open in public or it should be only in the domain of election commission. And similarly, authentication methods, should they be totally open or should they be biometric based, or should they be biometric come authentication based, or any other methods? Cost aspect has already been mentioned by Vinod Joshi. So these would be some requirements. And therefore, we will have to examine main requirements of our voting system, which I think this conference will take into account, which will, because there are administrators also here, so it should not only be the technology aspect, because before we move on to the technological development, we have to take into account these aspects also, like the specific requirements of voters. Inclusiveness is very significant for our society. I was told that some 7 or 8%, please correct me, are the internet users in the country, some 300 millions. And likewise, there are number of mobile users, and therefore the issue of equity will arise. Are we going to work only for these few numbers, or are we going to ensure the inclusiveness? What happens to the voters who are living in rural areas, who have never seen internet? Of course, Election Commission has an approach wherein we want to bring our rural areas under the coverage of our these citizen service centers, e-Kendra, voter facilitation centers. But again, we have to take into account the equity aspect of voters. The legal framework, as it will emerge, we will deal with it. The timeline, the phasing, transparency and certification, cost, training, capacity building, all these aspects will have to be factored in. Therefore, I feel that this is a huge opportunity which this conference is offering today, and I am sure this is a very historic beginning. We assure from the Election Commission of India that we will continue to work with the CDAC, with other leading professors in the country, abroad, companies which are engaged in development of technology, researchers, academicians, with our voters, with our political parties, governments, and everybody, to find a solution which will come in long term. I hold a very positive view about this our technology. We will also have to consider as and when the technology developed, whether it should be on a pilot basis or whether it should be escalated in going forward. These are some of my thoughts which I am sure this conference will take into account, and I wish this conference all success, and I look forward to its very practical and meaningful recommendations. Thank you very much.